Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming and a little Construct focused Diablo 4 video. Our Seneschal Construct companion has really come around, from a whelp that existed to grant us bonuses and not much else, to an actual companion that's dealing its own damage, partly because we can actually level it and get all the stones to level 10 for relevant power. You may have been seeing ridiculous World Tier 1 5 target dummy clips where people are hitting unironic billions by watching the Construct go to work and enhancing it themselves while doing so. The more realistic functional showcases of the Construct actually still do work to bosses all on its own, like killing Druid or even Uber Lilith solo. This is only better after the recent patch that increased the damage of different stones across the board. Without any crazy setup or anything silly, Josh is able to just go take out a boss by doing nothing in 24 seconds. The Construct is completely soloing this boss and it's doing it very fast. Obviously, if Josh was actually fighting the boss at the same time, it'd be dead like that. So we need to talk about a middle ground. How is this working? How can you make the most of it in more realistic gameplay where you are also fighting? You just need to understand how it's working and then keep that in mind for future builds and items you might consider because of it. So let's start by explaining how do you even scale the Construct's damage. I'm here in the training room to showcase this, and there's a few ways. The concept is to take your power though, and then by enhancing yourself, the Construct mirrors it, powering itself by whatever stats you have. That is the concept, but it doesn't work like that. Only specific aspects and combos actually work to enhance its damage. That comes in the simplest form, by raising your attack power, by raising your crit strike chance and damage, your vulnerable damage, even your attack speed. These things do work and will be mirrored by your Construct. Let's talk about what doesn't work. Damage increases, like conceited here, will improve your damage while you have a barrier active. The problem with this seems to be that while I have a barrier active, I'm getting extra damage, but there's no barrier around the Construct, since it can only give one to us and it doesn't really exist as a unit itself. That is seemingly why it can't benefit from something like conceited or any barrier related buff. This could also be said of things that improve your damage while fortified. Maybe you can fortify, right? But the Construct can't. So again, this is another damage type that doesn't apply to the Construct. It seems like if it's not directly affecting your offensive stats, it's not going to directly affect the Construct. So let's try some things that do actually work. For example, the inner calm aspect. This one increases your damage while you stand still. So as I move around, you see my attack power is 14,000 there. As I stand still, the attack power goes up to 16, then 18. So of course, the higher the number this is, the more the Construct benefits. And there are tons of ways to actually enhance the power of yourself and therefore the Construct. The more I attack, the more I juice myself up, and therefore more the Construct actually gets power as well. We can see my damage shooting up to 40k at this point. I've not actually done anything in particular, and that's already greatly enhancing the power of the Construct, letting it deal some big damage itself. Even though I'm just standing here, it is doing work. But I want this video to be a realistic way to enhance the power of your Construct, and something like Inner Calm is rarely used in any build. Having to hold yourself still like that, you're doing something very niche and specific to actually run that. Something that does work interestingly for you and your Construct is damage while healthy. We can see how that's reflected in my attack power. It's currently sitting at 18,000. As I lose these damage while healthy benefits, we go down to 16,000. Because it's so clearly increasing my attack power, we know it's enhancing the Construct. There's actually a great glyph for exactly this concept. Imbiber. If this is something that you are considering might be worth running in your build, I actually would strongly recommend it. For every 5 willpower purchased within range, you're going to increase your damage while healthy. But you can also find while healthy damage on affixes on your gear, and depending on your class, you can also find it in your skill tree. Blood builds are a good example of that. The problem with blood builds is they rely quite a lot on fortify, which doesn't work for the Construct, and unfortunately, overpower also doesn't work for the Construct. If we were to give an item example, we could look at the Melted Heart of Selig, which has a huge percent increase to that type of damage while healthy. So in short, in recap, increase your attack power, increase the power of the Construct as a base foundation to build on. There's loads of ways you could do that. Here's a Necromancer specific aspect, the Blighted aspect. You deal 120% times increased damage for 6 seconds after my key passive Shadow Blight triggers 10 times. So this is a major attack damage increase that's going to occur. And so there should be tons of forms of this depending on your class. So another great way to massively increase your raw all damage is something like the unique Tibalt's Will here. You deal up to 40% times increased damage while unstoppable for 4 seconds after. In the case of Necromancer, I don't have a great way to trigger that, unfortunately, but it's a 3-second self CC, so that's not ideal. But if I activate it, you can see how my attack power skyrockets and goes up for a period of time. It's only a 4-second buff we're talking about, and if you're playing a class that can actually manage Unstoppable effectively and reliably, that's going to be a reliable way to juice yourself and the construct at the same time. There are uber uniques that come into play here with all damage increases, like the Starless Skies Ring in Season 3. It's updated to now increase your damage up to another 40% times, just like Tibalt's, when spending your resources. Most builds and most classes are gonna be able to use this to great effect, so the fact that it majorly increases your construct power alongside yours is just good to know in general. But that's all damage and raw attack power increases. Let's now talk about the other ways to increase its damage. Like, one obvious way is the crit strike chance and also crit strike damage that it does benefit from. If you have a high crit strike chance baseline, this means the construct also is going to. I could take something like, say, the Bone Storm effect here of a Necromancer plus 20% critical strike chance while it's active. So we're going from a 40% standing here to a 60%. So that's a major buff for the actual construct at the same time. There's an aspect here, Grasping Veins. I gain 30% increased critical strike chance for 6 seconds whenever I cast these corpse tendrils. Further, 60% times increased critical strike damage. So the construct gets both of that. All I need is a corpse to actually pop and then do the tendril, and now I've got this massive crit strike chance improvement leading to way more damage while I'm going. There's another uber unique that plays into this. It's the Grandfather, and its ability to increase your critical strike damage by 100% times is also going to apply for the construct. That is a big part of how you're seeing those different clips where they're using the construct to deal insane damage. They have these uber uniques, and that's why it's possible. Ubers are good, and they're even better in Season 3. Not really surprising to say. Thankfully, there are many different sources of raw damage increases and crit increases, whether that's stuff that I've shown you so far or just affixes you find on your gear, like crit strike chance and damage on a ring. Swords, for example, come with crit strike damage built in as their kind of inherent passive. You can find it in the Paragon on something like the Essence Glyph. This is giving me straight critical strike damage as an additive, and then we have a multiplier when we're dealing damage to enemies that aren't healthy. But what is good news is that it benefits from vulnerable. So if you're able to generate vulnerable damage on enemies, it's going to make the construct deal more damage. And of course, with affixes like improving vulnerable damage here in my weapon, you can further benefit the construct. You can get tons of this in the Paragon, the skill tree, gear, whatever. This is why it works well for a Bone Spear Necromancer, because, you know, I'm kind of naturally doing crit strike chance, crit strike damage, vulnerable damage, and I'm able to generate it constantly. Every single Bone Spear that I throw is a guaranteed vulnerable effect, and I'm massively juicing up my crit strike chance, so the construct can go to town. And if I just stop attacking and watch it do its thing, we're seeing ticks of millions while I'm standing here doing nothing. This is why the Exploit Glyph is particularly good in Season 3 with the construct in mind. It's going to enhance your vulnerable damage, but also just dealing damage to vulnerable enemies, in this case for me, is increasing my damage by up to 10% times. This is a 6-second buff, but as I continue to attack vulnerable targets, that's what's actually scaling my attack power right now for that 6-second buff while I'm going. In Necromancer's specific case, we're able to get all damage from things like Fueled by Death. As I pop a corpse, I get a 9% times increase to, say, my attack power. And that's incredible when we look at something like the legendary node Flesh Eater, which when I consume 5 corpses is giving me a whopping 40% times increase. These juice me up, and so they juice the construct. As I mentioned though, it's not all rainbows and sunshine, not everything works. Like I said, the overpower damage type literally doesn't work for it. The construct cannot use overpower. There's no like governing stone skill that causes overpower, and it's not going to naturally do it by a % chance like we can. So this really sucks for, say, blood builds as a Necromancer. Like I say, they're going to be healthy a lot, so they're going to get that bonus, but the main damage focus is overpower, and since it's not scaling with that damage type, there's no double dip. That's why I think builds that double dip with a construct at this point are pretty much the best options we have. As I also mentioned, attack speed will also come into play. The more we have attack speed, the more attack speed the construct just naturally gets. So if you can get those affixes on your gear, that's also going to be beneficial. So to recap, you're going to want anything that can increase your raw attack power. All damage, the bigger this is, the bigger the construct's damage is going to be. It benefits from critical strike chance and damage because of that, and it benefits from vulnerable. It does not benefit from overpower, and because it can't be shielded or fortified, those also don't work. Any build that leans into all of these concepts at once then is going to be optimal in Season 3. That's all great, but now let's talk about what we're actually having the construct use to deal its damage and give us the most that it can. Well, there's two setups right now, and this is just one of them. Both are using Tempest either way, with some different support options depending on what class and build you're actually running. Tempest, as we know, deals damage to an enemy, and if that enemy dies, then it spreads the damage to another target that bounces, gets stronger, the more it bounces the better. But every time that he's attacking, he is applying a debuff to an enemy, dealing damage, and that's causing the effect. With high attack speed and support skills, that's applying faster. If you support this with different damage over time effects like we've got here, those ticks are also going to be dealing great damage and spreading based on that. And then their secondary effects are also going to come into play. Like say with burning support, burning enemies take 40% times bonus critical strike damage from the construct specifically. Poison is probably the other most commonly featured support skill right now, and this is because the poison has this percent chance to spread its poison damage that's built up to another enemy. So you can see how some of them are poisoned and then that's spreading, and the more it stacks up, the more damage that is actually spread. This is kind of a unique example and part of why you see these ridiculous clips against the training dummies, because they've got infinite health. So they have infinite time to, build up this potent stacking effect and spread it and spread it and spread it. Most enemies in the game right now are going to die well before then. It's important to know then that if you can enhance this kind of damage, you will be making this support effect from the construct better. Both druids and rogues should be able to enhance this type of damage best, poison, since they work with poison damage in different builds as a class. Compared to that, as a necromancer, I would consider something like dusk support. 60% of the supported skills damage is then dealt as shadow damage instead over 5 seconds, and then a not so exciting afflicted enemies who attack have a 15% chance for their attacks to be interrupted. Kind of nice DR, but when we compare this to like a spreading negative dot or a massive crit strike damage increase, it's not so exciting, is it? But because I am a necromancer, I can actually enhance my darkness and shadow skills, which will enhance that damage and work well with that dot. So that would be one of my better options for the type of dot options I have. As another example, if I was a barbarian, I'd definitely want to consider bleeding support because I'm able to actually improve that effect. And I suppose sorcerers have different ways to enhance, fire and burning damage as well. It depends on what class and build you're going for and whether you can enhance these types of dots as to what you'll choose. In the case of me and Bone Spear, I need to be generating lots of resources, and my third option with the shadow damage isn't relevant to a Bone Spear build. So I'm still able to work in a kind of normal support here and get a lot of benefit without overcommitting to these concepts. Now I said there was a second choice, and that's because it's down to your second governing stone. Flash of Adrenaline here gives you a 20% damage increase for up to 12 seconds when it's got duration support. So all damage increase is going to enhance the construct. It buffs me, and because of that, it buffs itself. If you go nuts with Flash of Adrenaline and you happen to have Genesis, you could take that 20% and turn it into 35%, which would only be better. So we want this to be as strong and as consistent as possible. Duration support increases the length by 4 seconds. Tactical reduces the cooldown. It lasts for 12 seconds and it has a 12-second cooldown. So it's always going. With Genesis, it'd be even better, but I don't have it, so I just have a whatever DR option. The alternative popular option is Firefly, which as you can see is firing out this fire projectile that's dealing nice damage as it hits. If we take a multi-shot support, it's going to launch multiple projectiles instead of just the one. The problem is that sends out in an arc, so it's not very effective. So if you slap on Seeking support, it's not just going to randomly fire out, but it's going to go to a target and smash it. If we put Piercing on, then it's actually going to go through the targets and continuously deal damage, lasting much more than the initial sort of collision. As you can see, it's spreading and dealing damage in AoE, which is nice, but it's even more effective in single target, and that's how we're seeing some silly clips where, the construct's just soloing. We found for our testing, though, that Adrenaline using Genesis with the combo of Firefly as the offensive ability, that's the best way the Seneschal is going to completely solo a boss. It's just the best single target DPS. But if you're doing mobbing, it's better to do Adrenaline with Genesis again, yes, but use Tempest for the AoE, of course, and all the spreading of the poison and the dots. It's so much more effective for mob clear. It's going to be interesting to see how this stacks up in, say, the upcoming gauntlet, and how relevant is the construct going to be there, or are we just going to use it for buffing because it can't keep up? We'll see, but that's what we've learned so far. Finally, I just wanted to highlight a few different examples that can help us understand different synergy options we have with a construct. As a Necromancer, obviously I have specific options, and I'll tell you why they work, and you can consider that for your class. If we look at, say, my unique passive, the Book of the Dead, I'm getting loads of effects here. With sacrificing my skirmishers, I'm getting 5% extra crit strike chance, great for my construct. With my skeletal mage's sacrifice, I'm enhancing my vulnerable damage. And with the golem, I'm enhancing my critical strike damage majorly, so of course again that benefits it. There are glyphs, for example, like sacrificial here, that causes a straight 10% times increased damage while I have no active minions, meaning I just have a 10% times increase to my damage always, and so does the construct. Little things like attack speed while I'm healthy with Inspiring Leader, again, that will benefit the construct. Memento Mori, it's going to enhance those actual sacrifices from Book of the Dead. And that's the idea. If you're able to double dip, enhance yourself, and thereby enhance the construct, you're doing the right thing. But yeah, that's the main concepts and details about our construct and how it's truly working and how we can actually enhance it. Like I say, I don't really believe it's worth it to gut your class and build just to make some sort of monstrous thing that makes the construct as strong as you can, outside of doing it because you think it's fun, and that's fine. But I think creating a build that suitably pushes your attack power, your crit, your vulnerable damage, the attack speed, while healthy effects, all the stuff that actually helps you and your construct at the same time to double dip kind of passively, then that's going to be a great build that's going to do great universally while also making their construct an absolute powerhouse at the same time. The main issue with the construct is just its function. Since we can't directly control it, or at least direct it to the target we want it to hit, just like all minions in this game, it doesn't matter how strong it is if it's hitting the wrong thing, or it's like wasting all of its damage into a suppressor field or something. I really thought in Season 3 they'd update the mechanical side of minions finally, but at this point I'm starting to wonder if they're ever going to do that. Anyway, I hope this video was useful and helped you understand all this better. If you have anything to add, you can leave it in the comments. But for now, I've been Hollow, you've been you. Thanks for watching.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.